Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt exhausted from constantly explaining yourself just to be misunderstood anyway? What if I told you that real peace begins the moment you stop defending who you are and start honoring your growth? Today, let's dive into the topic of how choosing silence over explanation can transform your self-worth and protect your energy. If you're ready to reclaim your power and finally feel free in your own skin, this message is for you. Subscribe to the channel for more content that helps you heal, grow, and stand strong in your truth. When someone misunderstands you, your heart breaks in silence. It's not the misunderstanding that hurts the most, it's the feeling that your truth didn't matter. You sit there with every intention to speak, to clear it up, to explain, and yet something inside you whispers, "Not this time," because you've done it before. You've poured your soul out into conversations that left you emptier than before they started. You've defended your kindness like it was a crime. You've tried to convince people of your worth as if their approval was oxygen. And still they questioned it. Still they twisted it. Still, you were left misunderstood, unheard, and unseen. You used to think defending yourself would lead to clarity, that if you just said the right words in the right tone, they'd finally get it. So you rehearsed your pain like poetry, hoping the delivery would make the difference. But no matter how soft your voice was, no matter how honest your truth was, the outcome was the same. You walked away carrying the weight of words that didn't land, of feelings that were never received. And in that quiet walk away, you started to feel something strange, relief. The kind that whispers, maybe this isn't yours to fix. Maybe your peace doesn't belong in someone else's hands. Silence became your survival, not because you didn't have nothing to say, but because you realized not everyone deserved access to your voice. You stopped engaging in conversations that were disguised as interrogations. You stopped replaying events in your mind, trying to figure out where you went wrong when you were only ever trying to love right. And that silence, it didn't make you cold, it made you clear. Clear about who you are, clear about who actually listens, clear about the cost of constantly defending yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. It hurts deeply when you realize your voice has only ever been used to convince someone to treat you better. You think back on all the moments you begged to be seen, begged to be understood, begged to be loved in a way that didn't come with conditions. And that's when it finally hits you. Love that needs to be explained isn't love at all. Respect that you have to fight for isn't real respect. And the moment you stop defending yourself is the moment you start respecting the version of you who no longer wants to beg for decency. You start practicing the habit of choosing yourself quietly. You don't slam doors anymore. You don't make announcements. You just slowly remove your presence from spaces that don't make you feel safe. And it's not petty. It's not passive-aggressive. It's protection. Because peace is sacred and peace is earned. You've spent too long trading your dignity for validation. Now you reclaim it, not through loud exits, but through calm boundaries, through walking away before they even realize you're gone, through smiling at your own reflection, knowing you didn't betray yourself this time. Sometimes people mistake your silence for weakness. They think if you're not fighting back, you're accepting defeat. But you know better now. You know silence can be the loudest form of power. You know that choosing not to respond doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means what you could say would cost you the peace you worked so hard to build. And you won't trade your healing for one more argument. You won't shrink just to be palatable. You won't play defense in a game you never signed up for. You've outgrown the need to perform your pain for the approval of others. You now understand that being misunderstood by others will never be more painful than betraying yourself to be accepted. You've cried enough tears into pillows that never answered back. You've screamed into rooms where no one truly listened. And in the echo of that loneliness, you found something sacred: self-trust. You learned to sit with your truth, even if no one else could hold it. You learned that some things aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be lived, felt, and healed in silence. And from that silence, you've grown a strength that doesn't shake. The hardest part is choosing not to respond when every bone in your body wants to defend your heart. But you breathe. You remember the last time you fought to be understood and came out more broken than before, and then you choose again: silence, peace, protection. You stop being the narrator of your own pain, trying to make it make sense to people who only want to rewrite your story. Instead, you write a new chapter, one where your worth is not up for debate, one where your identity is not rooted in someone else's misunderstanding of you. You now move differently. You observe more. You engage less. You recognize when someone is baiting you into defending your value, and instead of falling into that old loop, you smile softly and withdraw. Not out of fear, not out of submission, but out of deep, unshakable respect for your growth. You are no longer accessible to people who make you feel like you're too much or not enough. You are no longer available for conversations that drain your soul, and in that choice you find your freedom, not because they changed, but because you finally did. And so you walk away quietly, not with resentment, not with anger, but with peace, the kind of peace that doesn't need to be posted, the kind of peace that doesn't need to be proven. You've stopped explaining, stopped chasing, stopped defending. And in that stillness, in that deep and holy quiet, you hear something powerful rise from within you, your own voice, not shaking, not desperate, but grounded. Finally, you listen to it, and finally, you believe it. There was a time you used to wake up with a heavy chest, already preparing for the weight of justifying yourself to the world. You rehearsed answers to questions no one asked out loud but always implied, why you were quiet, why you chose distance, why your joy didn't look loud. You'd walk into rooms and feel the eyes measuring you, not for your soul but for your responses. And every time you didn't explain yourself, the silence grew louder, like an accusation. So you'd fold, you'd speak, you'd defend, you'd give away pieces of your peace just to feel understood, accepted, safe. But the safety never came. Only the exhaustion did. Only the ache of giving away too much of yourself to people who never offered that same grace in return. You started to realize something terrifying, that your peace was never protected. It was borrowed, conditional, dependent on keeping everyone else comfortable, even at the cost of your own well-being. You began to notice how often you were tense, bracing for conflict, ready to explain every decision, every reaction, every emotion. You felt like you were on trial in your own life, and the worst part, no one saw the damage it was doing to you. Because on the outside you looked composed, you smiled, you nodded, you held it together. But inside your soul was screaming, begging for rest, for refuge, for silence that felt like softness instead of suppression. So you began to learn the difference between peace and avoidance, between boundaries and walls, between a habit you developed because someone somewhere taught you that love had to be earned through explanation. That worth needed a witness, that safety was only given to those who could justify their existence. But you were never meant to live on trial. You were never meant to explain why you need softness, why you walk away from chaos, why your no is enough without an essay behind it. So now, you protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. You no longer enter arguments just to prove you didn't mean harm. You no longer beg to be heard in rooms that only echo your pain back to you. You don't show up to every fight you're invited to, because peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self-respect. You've learned that not every accusation needs an answer, not every misunderstanding needs a meeting. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is pause, breathe, and walk away. Not to win, but to preserve what took you years to rebuild, your calm. You've started building new habits, small but sacred. You give yourself permission to log off, to say no, to decline explanations that drain your spirit. You wake up and choose stillness, not because there's no noise, but because you refuse to carry it anymore. You stop overthinking every word you said yesterday, stop replaying every conversation like a courtroom transcript. You refuse to become a prisoner of other people's interpretations. You find peace in knowing that your truth does not require defense, that your heart, however quiet, is honest. And honesty doesn't always come with loud declarations. It often arrives in quiet exits. The world might still ask for explanations. You may still feel the pull to speak up, to clarify, to fix how others see you. But now, you sit with that discomfort. You let it pass like a wave, instead of reacting to it like a storm. You remind yourself, you are not responsible for the story someone tells themselves about you. You are only responsible for protecting the story you tell yourself when you're alone. And that story, it now begins with gentleness, with softness, with the choice to stay rooted in peace, even when the world invites you into chaos. That's not easy, but it's worth everything. You stop chasing closure in conversations that only leave you hollow. You stop returning to people who require your pain as proof of love. You stop performing for acceptance. And in that stillness, something powerful begins to grow. Trust, not in others, but in yourself. You trust your instincts again. You trust your intuition. You trust that walking away is not giving up, it's growing up. You begin to understand that peace is not passive, it's active. It's choosing over and over not to let people drag you into battles that steal your softness and blur your boundaries. It hurts, though. Let's be honest. Choosing peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you start feeling everything more honestly. You feel the grief of letting go. You feel the ache of being misunderstood. You feel the emptiness of people who don't call back when you stop explaining. And still, you choose peace. You choose it in tears. You choose it in quiet. You choose it even when it feels lonely, because you know what it cost you to live without it. You remember the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the constant war between who you are and who you felt forced to become just to be accepted. Now, peace looks like boundaries. It looks like rest. It looks like walking out of rooms that make you return to the woman you were before the world taught her to shrink. You remembered who you were without the noise. You don't owe anyone a version of you that sacrifices peace for approval. You've lived that version. She's tired. She's done. Now, you protect your peace the way others protect their pride, with firmness, with clarity, with no apology. You've earned the right to choose what keeps your heart soft and your mind clear. You don't have to explain that to anyone. And when they push back, when they ask why you've become so distant, so quiet, so unreachable, you let them wonder. Because the woman you are becoming has learned not everything requires your voice. Some things are answered best by your absence. There's a kind of ache that lives in your chest when you realize you've been carrying conversations in your heart that never even existed out loud. You write the messages but don't send them. You rehearse the closure but never receive it. You walk around haunted by words you never got to say and apologies you never got to hear. And after a while, it starts to feel like you're the only one left in a room that was supposed to be shared. You hold both the questions and the answers, the pain and the pretending. You try to make sense of why someone could leave you so confused and then expect you to make it all make sense. But it never does. And so you live in the aftermath, looking for closure in echoes that never respond. You begin to realize that the most painful goodbyes are the ones never spoken, the ones where someone leaves but pretends it wasn't their choice. You're left trying to heal from something that was never named. And the worst part, they go on like nothing happened, like your silence is consent, like your heartbreak is invisible. You start to wonder if it even mattered, if you even mattered. You replay every moment in your mind like a detective, trying to find the moment it all changed, but the truth is there was no warning, just a slow fade, a colder tone, a distant reply, and you were left holding a connection that only existed on your end. You sit with the questions and they begin to rot inside you. Was I not enough? Was I too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I love the wrong way? The overthinking eats you alive because no one gave you a clear reason to stop caring. They just stopped showing up, and now you're left defending your healing to yourself. You tell yourself it's okay to move on, but your heart hasn't caught up. It still waits for a knock on the door, a message, a reason, but none comes. And so you write your own reasons, your own closure, even though it tastes like lies on your tongue, because anything is better than feeling discarded without explanation. But then something shifts, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. You stop needing the closure you never got. You stop begging for an ending from someone who never valued your beginning. You realize that closure doesn't come from a conversation. It comes from your decision to stop bleeding for someone who walked away without checking if you were okay. You give yourself the space to grieve, not just the person, but the version of you who kept waiting. You sit with the silence, and for the first time, it feels honest. It hurts, but at least it's real. At least it's yours. At least you're no longer begging someone else to finish a sentence they abandoned. You start to write new habits into your life, ones that don't revolve around defending your pain. You don't explain why you left. You don't justify why you stopped reaching out. You don't owe anyone a play-by-play of your healing. Your silence becomes sacred. It becomes your shield, your boundary, your power. Because the truth is, some people don't want to understand. They just want access. And when you stop defending your growth, you realize how many connections were built on your willingness to keep breaking just to keep the peace. You don't want that anymore. You want peace that doesn't come at the cost of yourself. It's not easy. Some days you still want to send the message, still want to explain the pain, still want to ask why. But instead you write in your journal. You cry in your car. You scream into a pillow. You let the emotions pass without turning them into performance. Because you're not healing for an audience. You're healing for the girl inside you who kept trying to make sense of mixed signals, who kept rewriting herself to be more lovable, who kept hoping they'd come back with an explanation. You owe her the dignity of moving on, even when the door never officially closed. You learn that not all stories end with punctuation. Some end in mid-sentence. Some drift into silence. Some break your heart without ever giving you the decency of goodbye. And you accept it. Not because it makes sense, but because it no longer has to. You choose to stop searching for closure and start searching for peace. You replace the why with what now. You stop asking what went wrong and start asking what feels right. You let the questions be. You let them go unanswered. Because some pain isn't meant to be solved, it's meant to be survived. You become more protective of your heart, more intentional with your energy. You don't just give people access because they ask for it. You require consistency. You require respect. You require effort. And when it's not there, you no longer explain why you're pulling away. You just do. Quietly, gracefully, powerfully. Because the version of you who once fought to be seen has now realized her worth doesn't live in someone else's clarity. It lives in your own commitment to never abandon yourself again. That's the kind of love you're building now, one that starts with you, one that doesn't crumble when others walk away. The ache still lingers, some days more than others, but now you sit with it instead of running from it. You let it teach you without letting it define you. You let it soften you without letting it destroy you. You allow yourself to miss what you thought was real. You allow yourself to grieve what never got the ending it deserved. But you don't chase answers anymore. You don't chase closure. You don't chase people. You simply breathe. You exist. You heal. You remember that your worth was never tied to someone's ability to recognize it. It was always yours, whether they saw it or not. You don't need to prove your healing to anyone. That's the lesson you learn when you finally stop explaining why you changed, why you're quieter now, why you don't react like you used to. Because the truth is, healing made you different. Not harder, not colder, just more careful with your energy. And somewhere along the way, you realized that the more you tried to justify your growth, the more it felt like shrinking again. Like defending your peace was somehow selfish. Like moving forward without asking for permission was wrong. But it's not wrong. It's the most honest thing you've ever done. There was a version of you who used to argue with anyone who questioned your heart. She would cry just to be heard, tremble just to be seen. She would go quiet, not because she wanted to, but because the room had already decided who she was. So she fought for clarity, for understanding, for basic human decency. And still, it never came. All that effort, and still, they misunderstood her. Still, they twisted her intentions. Still, they walked away like she was the one who did the damage. And she carried that weight. She carried it until it broke something inside of her. Healing began when she stopped performing, when she stopped sitting across from people who only listened to respond. When she realized that no explanation could change someone. It wasn't empowering at first, it was devastating because she wanted to be understood. She wanted someone to care enough to lean in, to ask, to stay, but no one did. And that silence became her answer. So she learned to stop begging for what should have been freely given: respect, patience, and the benefit of the doubt. There's a specific kind of heartbreak in knowing you were always trying to explain a version of yourself to someone who never saw your heart in the first place. You gave your softest words, your rawest honesty, your truest intentions, and still they questioned your character, not once, but over and over, until you began questioning yourself, until you stood in the mirror, not knowing whether to trust your reflection or their opinion of you. And that kind of doubt, it doesn't just bruise your confidence, it rearranges your identity, it turns you into a stranger in your own body. But then came the choice, painful and liberating, the choice to stop justifying your growth, the choice to stop shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You stopped clarifying your boundaries, you stopped defending your healing process, you stopped apologizing for needing distance, and it hurt. It hurt to be seen as cold when you were just tired of burning yourself out trying to be warm enough for everyone else. It hurt to be called selfish when you finally chose yourself, but it also healed you, because every step you took away from explaining yourself was a step toward reclaiming your power. Some people made your healing feel like betrayal. They acted like your growth was an attack, like your silence was punishment, like your peace was a problem, and for a while you almost believed them. You almost went back to oversharing, overloving, overfixing, until you remembered all the times you did that and still felt invisible, still felt unheard, still felt not enough. That is when you knew you weren't the villain in this story. You were just a woman trying to recover from being everything to everyone and nothing to herself. You've learned now that healing doesn't come with explanations. It comes with boundaries, with quiet mornings and nights full of reflection, with walking away from conversations that feel like combat, with letting people misunderstand you rather than losing yourself in the process of trying to be understood. You stop trying to fix people's perception of you. You start honoring your reality. You stop trying to win arguments. You start protecting your energy. You stop being available to people who only show up when you're breaking. And instead, you show up for yourself in ways no one ever did. There's strength in silence, but not the kind you were forced to learn through pain. This silence is intentional, sacred. It's the space you give yourself to breathe without pressure, to heal without commentary, to grow without being watched. You no longer feel the need to tell your side of the story. Because if someone needs a story to believe you deserved love, they were never truly invested in loving you. You let them talk, let them wonder, let them write their version. You stay still, you stay rooted, you stay true to the woman you've become. You know now that people will question your healing because it no longer benefits them, because it no longer allows access to the broken pieces they once controlled. But you've gathered those pieces, gently, painfully, one by one. You've learned how to hold yourself through lonely nights, how to validate your own emotions, how to remind yourself that growth doesn't need witnesses to be real. And you stopped expecting anyone to clap for your progress. Some of your biggest victories have been invisible, private, sacred, and those are the ones that changed everything.